Okay, Wednesday edition of the After Show. You got Weekend Justice with you, Wink, over here on the East Coast.
And Justice over here on the West Coast of the contiguous United States of America. It is, yes, Wednesday's child is full of whoa Wednesdays. You think that there's breaking news? There's breaking news on top of breaking news. There's no way we're going to keep up on it. It's going to be breaking even while we're breaking.
Yeah.
But before we get into the breaking news, Wink, how are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. It is partly cloudy, partly sunny, 57. Kind of really surprised at that 57 number, but it's supposed to be colder. I think it's supposed to be like 47, but we'll take 57. Reminder to get in the chat. Just go to netrootsradio.com. Scroll down the bottom of the page, and on the right-hand side of the bottom of the page, there is a link to the chat. So click that. Join us there.
And by either Providence or Deft Graphic Design, to the leftish of the chat room link are the Donate Contribute buttons. You have choices. Yes, indeed. We are very democratic here. On purpose.
Yeah.
So thank you for your generosity. We're unable to do it without you. We are attempting to raise funds to upgrade our hardware and software, which is just the way it is when you're in the resistance.
Yes.
You think about the French resistance and the Italian resistance. You know, when they were out in the field, they still had to replace the tubes in their radios. Their clandestine radios, Wayne, to broadcast, to the BBC, so the BBC could give their coordinates to the people in the resistance.
Exactly. Yep.
Even they had to buy tubes. Oh, well, Wink, here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, it is currently, let me bring up the Weather Underground tab. Oh, it's gone up. It's 41 degrees. We are set for a high of 59, a little bit lower than what we had yesterday. It is quite dark right now. Though not raining, though we're slated, of course, to have a few showers.
Right.
And we will through today and tonight. And then it looks like we have sun from tomorrow through the weekend, which obviously means I'm going to have to get out there and mow the lawn.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll dry out by the time I can get to it, which will probably be Friday. If it rains today, it'll be a little too bouncy, shall we say. Yeah, bouncy. Yeah, you step into it and it's like splash. I hate mowing wet lawns, Wink. I don't know about you.
Yeah,
since
same here.
I'm pushing it. I'm pushing the machine. Okay.
Yep.
And it has no assist. Doesn't you don't like press a bar and then it like pulls you.
Right.
You have to push.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I don't have the auto forward whatever where you just push a button whatever way it goes.
Yeah.
I have to push it.
Yep. Well, I had mentioned breaking news. This just came up just before we came on. Jason Chaffetz, Wink, has announced that he will not seek re-election. So I wonder what that's all about. Of course, this comes on the heels of the news that the FBI has been using Michael Steele's dossier to get its FISA warrants, which means the FBI, which brings criminal indictments against people, Wink. They don't do this stuff just for fun so that they can have like an oversight committee look into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, they do these things because, their jollies is like getting an indictment, a conviction, and then throwing somebody's ass in jail.
Yep.
In fact, I think that's what their mission statement is. But, so it's funny how when we first heard about this dossier, what was the first thing we heard about the dossier? Yeah, something about the Russian pee room. Oh, there were some parties at the Russian pee room, salacious sexual stuff.
Yeah.
To, diminish its veracity. Because people will go, oh, it's just a sex dossier. Yeah. Right? When in reality, what it was is what caused Michael Steele in the first place to run to these various intelligence agencies and say, you know what, this looks really bad. In fact, I'm frightened. And he was. And now Jason Chaffetz has decided not to run for re-election. And there's a few others. What happened to David Nunes? You ever hear about David Nunes anymore?
No.
Now, he hasn't given up the chairmanship of his Intelligence Oversight Committee. He's just handed over the reins while, this procedure is going on. But do you ever hear about him anymore? Interesting. But there's all sorts of other news that's happening, and the big one is that we visit again with Angela Marx today. So I should get into the issues that we will be attending to today. Wink U.S. drug wholesaler McKesson Medical Surgical Inc. sues Arkansas for fraud in how it obtained the company's banned lethal injection drugs. The private prison industry's pay-to-play strategy is a lucrative success under the Trump administration, as you would expect it to be.
Yeah.
And Trump's missile attack on Syria was justified with, wait for it, fake intelligence. Well, I don't know. What do you expect? Sharon picking what you want? Here, look at this. Well, as I mentioned for the last half, we do get to visit with Angela Marx, always affectionately known still as Angie in Washington State.
Okay.
And we're going to have a discussion on the Second Amendment and the Heller decision and society's failure in having a proper discussion on the gun issue. And the link to that is to the diary that she wrote yesterday. And it was about, some of these, public murders, that are on, like Facebook and hell, even, cable TV, right? And that brought to mind for me, and Angie may or may not know about these movies, but the proliferation of these public murders seems to be more reminiscent of the U.S. film production of Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, rather than the Belgian-produced Man Bites Dog.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't remember those movies?
I don't remember those, no.
Yeah, of course not, because they were in the art houses. They would never have been in Lowe's.
Yeah, there you go. Okay,
Come on.
They would never show them
All
up in my
that.
neck of the woods back way, especially way back
No
then.
way. No way. You'd have to go into some like backwater, backdoor basement theater in Greenwich Village, maybe.
Right.
To see those movies.
Yeah.
Okay. Now on the West Coast, they're at the, like the main drags of Berkeley and stuff. I mean, they probably have a art house revival of both those movies, and they do. Well, all that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Codes community calendar, and as you can sense, more, even more, on the after show with that ever so fine fellow on the East Coast, and his name is Wink, and this guy back over here on the West Coast. My name is Justice, and we do this here on the after show 5 days a week for an hour-ish in this particular, specific, and peculiar tear in the fabric of space-time because, well, truly and affectionately, who loves your baby?
Exactly.
Yes. Well, Julia Roberts apparently has been anointed as the most beautiful woman in the world for, I don't know, the upteenth time. And some people are upset about that.
Huh?
So, in some way it is kind of weird to sort of, hold up a standard of beauty that others have to aspire to, and then we get depressed because we can't. But I don't know. This is a process of life. I gave up looking like George Clooney a long time ago, especially when I kept looking in the mirror and I kept seeing Brian Dennehy.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. I'm the same boat, yeah.
From George Clooney to Brian Dennehy. If I'm lucky, Brian Dennehy. I had to get used to it. But no, on the other hand, Julia Roberts, I like Julia Roberts. She's quite beautiful.
Pretty good actor.
She is.
Yeah.
She is indeed. But that's interesting. Our armada is now steaming. Wink. They steam now. Apparently, nuclear-powered vessels don't exist in our fleet. But we're steaming to the Sea of Japan To put Kim Jong, is it ill? Who's running Korea? Trump doesn't seem to know. I think he'll just call him Ron. Why don't you just call the leader of Korea Ron? Put him in his place. Yes, those are references to Trump going to Wisconsin and calling Paul Ryan Ron, and mistaking the current leader of Korea with his grandfather. But,
yeah.
Propecia. He uses Propecia for his hair wink. And, goes right there into the brain pan, sloshing around. And when it sloshes around in a brain like that, there's a big time slosh. You can hear it. Notice how cloudy his eyes are? He says he doesn't drink. Looks like something else is going on there, maybe, huh?
Yeah.
It's a bit concerning. Okay, let's get into these stories because we only have so much time, and really want to get into the Second Amendment and Heller and how it really impacts these, gun fails, from little kids getting shot up to everything else. Is crazy. I don't know. Why don't we just everybody carry shoulder-fired missiles? Wink. Constitutional.
Do it. Yeah.
Yep. Let's just do that. Can you imagine the safety switch on one of those? Well, there probably is. How do I know? I've never picked one up. You probably have.
No, I have not. That's one thing I've not.
You never had to
really.
back in the day?
No, not even back in the day.
No bazookas or anything like that?
I never got one of those shoulder rocket launcher deals.
What about mortars? You ever do mortars?
Yep, I did. Yeah, we did do some mortars with a similar I guess, configuration, but never the rocket launcher thing. No.
I built a trebuchet with some friends. It's like the old time, catapult. Hay bale across a field and hit some structure with it or whatever. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
That's as close to any military type real stuff that, mortars and all that. I have friends who would go to these playgrounds and you could blow up cars and trucks with, 50 caliber weapons,
hell yeah,
and bazookas and all this crazy stuff. And I was never intrigued. But that's why I say, if we're going to carry around all those weaponry, let's just carry around shoulder-fired missiles and get it over with. Come on.
Heck yeah.
All right. Arkansas getting sued for fraud. Of course, they say they did everything legal because we're the state, and what we do is legal. Well, you went on the black market to buy drugs. Yeah, but when we do it, it's legal. All right. Especially when they want to kill people with it. Talk about poison coming into our society to kill people. Jeez. This is out of Reuters. Drug wholesaler McKesson Medical Surgical Inc. sued Arkansas a second time yesterday, saying the state acted fraudulently in obtaining a drug it intends to administer in a record number of executions this month and demanding it not use the batch to kill people. It is crazy how they want to just pack this all in. It's almost as if this authoritarian dictator installed by a foreign power gives them carte blanche to do what they've been wanting to do all along. Damn it. We've been constricted by these damn regulations called constitutional rights. Damn it. Petty regulations, wink. Petty. Arkansas, which last put someone to death 12 years ago, is seeking to resume capital punishment with a plan that originally called for the executions of 8 inmates in 11 days. That would be the most in the United States in as short a period since the death penalty's reinstatement in 1976. I guess back in the day, they would just kill dozens of people like on an assembly line, I guess. Maybe they did. Arkansas has faced a barrage of legal challenges, which have so far resulted in 3 of the executions being halted and criticism that the state is acting recklessly. In a separate action yesterday, Tuesday, lawyers for all 8 inmates filed a petition with the U.S. Supreme Court to halt all the executions on issues including drug protocols and access to counsel. Arkansas's capital punishment push came as the number of U.S. executions fell to a quarter-century low in 2016. They go, oh my God, we haven't been killing people at the rates we should be. We have to bring those numbers up, damn it. Are we going to let China overtake, Saudi Arabia, overtake us in sheer numbers of executions in a year? How dare we allow that to happen? We're number one.
We're always number one, yeah.
Yes, well, at least in this reporter's opinion.
Yeah.
Arkansas contends it must act quickly because one of the drugs in its lethal injection mix, the Valium-like sedative midazolam, expires at the end of April. I think we're almost there. You know, if it expires at the end of April on April 19th, I think it's done. Excuse me. But they're thinking, oh, no, it'll be good really until like about May 10th. And I'm thinking on April 19th, it's done. In his lawsuit, McKesson Medical Surgical, a unit of McKesson Corp., yes, we all know them. You think they only make soup. Said the Arkansas Department of Corrections acted deceitfully when it purchased another drug, the chromium bromide, a commonly used muscle relaxant given in extreme doses in executions to paralyze the body and halt breathing. The Arkansas Department of Corrections intended to use this product in connection with executions, a fact that was never disclosed to McKesson, the company said in a filing at a state court in Little Rock. In addition to the Department of Correction, the lawsuit named the department's head, Wendy Kelly, and Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson as defendants. Well, the company originally sued Arkansas last week in state court, but withdrew the action when a federal court on Saturday issued stays and temporarily halted the execution of all 8 inmates, but the stays were overturned by a federal appeals court on Monday. The company wants the drugs impounded, and Arkansas contends it has acted legally. Of course they have. All right. I don't know. I'm all for locking them up and throwing away the key. That seems reasonable, doesn't it? But killing them, I don't know. I've never liked that part of it.
Right.
Ugh. And then the almost frenetic and gleeful pace in which they want to kill people.
Right.
Okay. That's just me. It's almost sort of like, the Obama administration said there's something inherently morally evil about a private prison industry. One that is predicated upon the idea that the prisons must be full at all costs. There's something inherently evil in that construct, and we have to wind it down, and then we get this guy installed in the White House, and now it's a booming industry once again. This is by Jen Budd out of Crooks and Liars. Right now, on the heels of Jeff Sessions' announcement that even non-criminals will now be charged with a felony and imprisoned for simply trying to find a job. ICE just announced that they awarded the GEO Group, the one that did the Blackwater thing, Blackwater in Iraq, built showers, and troops would step into the showers and they get electrocuted because of the bad wiring in the shower area. GEO Group has been doing that with their private prisons. I don't know, is it the same electrician that worked for Blackwater got the job at GEO? Makes you wonder, huh? Weird. Well, they just were awarded with a brand new contract. The GEO Group is one of the largest private prison corporations with, count them, 74 prisons, 50 residential reentry facilities. I think, are those halfway houses? Except they're not really halfway houses. They're sort of like halfway detention camps. There we go. 61 day reporting groups and 12 juvenile prisons. Well, that means that the desks are a little bit lower to the ground. That's always good. Thanks to all the money they shell out to politicians, they can add one more prison specifically designated for immigrants. Ooh, this new facility is built in Conroe, Texas, where it already runs and owns the Joe Corley Detention Facility that also houses immigrants and federal marshals prisoners. Nice. Private prisons have been dumping money into politicians' pockets for years now. It's nothing new. And all that money, every bit of it, is taxpayer money, Wink. The private prisons gets to dole out the money to buy the politicians, and we're paying for it. We're giving it to them. Man, I want in. Jesus. This is the stuff they always accuse us of doing, Wink.
It's quite the racket, I got to say, yeah.
Over the last 14 years, GEO alone has hired 290 lobbyists costing over $11.5 million. Add to that another $7.5 million given directly to candidates, and you've got a pay-to-play scandal.
Yeah. Yep.
GEO maintains prisons all over the country, but their biggest political targets are in, that's right, Florida and the other border states. Isn't it the southern border states? Odd, isn't it? You know, the same ones that had a history of kind of like a institutionalized prison complex, and they made these prisoners become forced laborers.
Right.
Remember that? 3/5 of a human, just so they get counted on the census, so they could maintain their superiority and political clout. Curious.
Yeah.
Well, ever since the private prison industry got a whiff of former President Obama's plan to no longer contract with them, the GEO Group had been working overtime lobbying Congress. Well, more to the point, lobbyist forms filed with Congress show that the GEO Group was specifically asking Congress to allow them to incarcerate immigrants. And many of those forms list when Senator Jeff Sessions is their target. Trump had named Sessions as his pick for Attorney General as early as June of 2015, which would explain the sudden interest in lobbying him to use private prisons to incarcerate immigrants, because he wanted to call them filth in that speech. What's funny is the statements about them leading up to the point where he just couldn't say the word filth. I thought what he had said about them was pretty clear about his intentions and how he views human beings of a particular hue. Kind of makes you wonder where Trump got the idea. I mean, which came first? The chicken and the egg story. Did Jeff Sessions come up with the rapist, drug dealers, and stuff, or did Trump? Which came first? Or was it like a symbiotic sudden awareness that from I don't know, longtime bigotry so pronounced that it's become unconscious in their behavior, they're not even aware of it? I'm not a bigot. So, we got the local pay to play. I mean, the federal pay to play where, they're buying off Congress and with lobbying and donations to their campaigns. But the local pay to play is where it really gets quite corrupt. And that's where people actually go to jail, Wink. So I would suppose that when we rest Congress, can you imagine a Democratic candidate taking over Jason Chaffetz's spot in Utah?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yep.
Well, I think that's how we rectify it. 2018 is, I keep telling everybody, it's like just a few months.
Right.
It's not like down the road.
Yeah, September, they'll be gearing up.
All right. Okay, well, this is by Steven Rosenfeld out of Alternet by way of raw story. On April 7th, Trump committed his first act of war, attacking Syria with missiles in response to what he said was a poison gas attack by the Syrian government that killed dozens. But the White House's subsequent intelligence report, offering its proof of Syria's role was false and fraudulent, suggesting a cover-up by a president acting without any intelligence and intentionally lying to the public. You know, you probably are like me. I mean, I'm fairly imbued with this belief that those attacks took place. I mean, there were irrefutable imagery that we saw.
Yep. And
we were told who was at fault. And now our own intelligence community is saying, no, that's not what happened. Interesting. But it was used in a shock doctrine sort of way, right? Okay. Well, these are the characterizations that was suggesting a cover-up by president acting without any intelligence and intentionally lying to the public. I think they mean intelligence from the intelligence community, because it's a given that whenever Trump does something, it's done without any intelligence, meaning like an intelligence quotient measured by his capacity in which to, process intelligence. Okay, the characterizations of two longtime experts in war studies and missile systems, which, along with coordinated comments by Vice President Mike Pence in South Korea and Secretary of State Tillerson in Russia, that America's strategic patience is ending, suggests Trump may be seeking a war of choice, even if it involves fabricated intelligence. Well,
no, it's never stopped us before.
Well, yeah. Then the article goes into all what we know about what Trump did. I mean, what Bush and Cheney did.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
With stovepiping intelligence and all, any number of things, plus out and out lying. But I think the more immediate story is that this is nothing new for Trump. This isn't anything that's out of the ordinary. When Trump said that Obama was wiretapping him in Trump Towers, the call went out to find any and all intelligence to corroborate the lie. And I'm not just making that up. We all felt that this is like what was going on. And now it's coming out through documents from committees and whatnot. That's indeed what happened. Fix the truth around this guy's statements to make it true. Wow. Please. So the 4-page white paper released by the White House purporting to prove that the Syrian government was responsible for the chemical weapons attack does not provide any of the actual evidence they claim to rely on, these experts said. It makes a set of assertions, describes the kind of information they have, and essentially then says, trust us. Or as Trump likes to say, believe me. That's his tell. Whenever he says, believe me, it's a lie.
Yeah.
And that's one of his favorite sayings. So he's lying all the time. Believe me. It appears to be a White House that is, and that is a political document, not the official position of intelligence agencies themselves. Does not provide anything close to proof or even evidence of the who, the what, or the how of the chemical attack. Okay. So it's not the first time that these experts have analyzed evidence coming out of a White House. Says the Obama administration had another incident like this in August of 2013, but it's somewhat different. The president was incorrectly told that Syria was the perpetrator of the attack in Ghouta on August 21st of 2013, And he was preparing to attack Syria when he was finally told, as he proceeded, that the intelligence did not solidly support the conclusion. That's when he backed down. He didn't back down because he didn't have the courage to take the action. He backed down because his intelligence people said we're wrong. And Trump's attitude is, I want to blow something up. Come on. All right. Let's get to our Jim Hightower break. We'll come back, go through the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast community calendar, and then have a sober conversation with Angela Marx. You're listening to the After Show on Networks Radio with Wicked Justice, and we will be right back.
Trump, Trump, Trump. Troops are marching to battle. Boom, boom, boom. Bombs are blowing up communities. Whoosh. Poisonous gas is being released. Forget Syria, ISIS, Iran, Afghanistan. This is Trump's war. Our bellicose commander-in-chief is at war in the homeland, deploying his troops to attack everything from our public schools to the EPA, dropping executive order bombs on Muslim communities in the Mexican border, and spewing poisonous tweets of bigotry and right-wing bile at the media, scientists, inner cities, illegal voters, Meryl Streep, diplomats, Democrats, people who use real facts, and, well, Trump is at war with the American majority, with all who do not agree with him. And you thought Nixon had a long enemies list. Yet, Trump's most destructive assault so far has not targeted any one group, but an essential and existential concept: truth. Bluntly put, he's psychotic, believing that truth is whatever he says it is, and that he can change it tomorrow. Years ago, in a futuristic novel, the author wrote about the rise of a tyrannical regime that ruled by indoctrinating the masses to accept the perverse notion of capricious truth. It was George Orwell's 1984, which depicted a dystopia he named Oceania. There, the public had been inculcated to believe that reality is not, quote, something objective, external, existing in its own right. Rather, whatever the party holds to be truth is truth. Now, in 2017, we live in Trumplandia, with a delusional leader of a plutocratic party trying to redefine reality with alternative facts and fake news. This is Jim Hightower saying, but resistance is already surging, including the fact that Orwell's 70-year-old book has become a bestseller again, thanks to Trump resistors seeking, truth.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Okay, we're back.
And indeed, we are back, and thank you for sticking with us. This is the After Show with Lincoln Justice here along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the West Coast. Wink is in upstate New York, 21 on the East Coast. Angie in Washington State is safely ensconced in Southwest Washington State. Our crew are the ethereal creatures who reside in the cloud, whose advanced, intergalactic, technical abilities allow Networks Radio, and thus by extension the After Show, to span the globe, the solar system, out past the Oort cloud, and beyond.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Hey, we're supposed to be crashing one of our probes into is it Neptune? Yeah, or is it Uranus? One of the big gas giants.
Yeah, on the up.
I I like that.
That should be fun. Yep.
Okay, so today's Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Diary is facilitated by Forrester Bob, and he begins the diary today about a question: sustainable tuna? And I have to say, I've been an advocate of the sustainable movement way back when the first Earth Day had occurred back in the day, in the 70s.
Yeah, back in the day, 70.
A 15-year-old sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
And there is some question about how much tuna that we're actually getting is sustainable and maybe, just labeled as such. But there are groups that are reputable that will rate, and you can follow them. And just I suppose to get quick to the end of the story, StarKist, way down on the list. Don't buy StarKist.
Okay.
Somewhat lucky here on the West Coast. Generally, you can get tuna fresh, so if you want to can it, why would you? So, okay, so the best is Wild Planet, American Tuna, and Whole Foods Market 365. Though I was part of a group called Friends Don't Let Friends Buy at Whole Foods.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
All right, new groups forming. Wisconsin Cossacks are forming their group, so Cosmail Chris the Colladem, if you would like to become a Wisconsin Cossack. I suppose you don't have to actually be in Wisconsin, but if you have Wisconsin in your heart or Wisconsin cheese in your pantry, Wisconsin cheese in your pantry, take it out of your pantry and put it in the refrigerator until it's ready for use.
There you go.
So Cosmail Chris the Colladem for that. The Colorado Communities Caffeinating Liberally meetup this week or this month will be moved this Saturday, April 22nd, Earth Day. And they'll be meeting at Rooster Cat, 1045 Lincoln Street in Denver, a little bit earlier, 8:30 a.m., because they will be participating in the March for Science that begins around 10 or 11. So looks like you want to get hold of Colo Tim and Left Candid. New York Cossacks are meeting up on Sunday, the next day, April 23rd, at Spitzer's Corner, 101 Remington Street in the Ludlow District at high noon. Navajo is in town. So
Yes.
Cosmail, Navajo to RSVP, and there's quite a group meeting up. New England Cossacks will have their annual Cheers and Jeers Cossack meetup Saturday, April 29th at noon at Flatbread Pizza in Portland, Maine. Cosmail and Hawks 42 to RSVP for a seat. Of course, it is a planning session for Netroots Nation. You know that. And the People's Climate March is occurring on 4/29, and there are scores and scores of sister marches. So go to the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Diary for the links to meet up for March in your area. And the Asheville Daily Coast group is meeting up on Saturday, May 16th, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Salvage Station for 66 Riverside Drive in Asheville. Cosmail Randalt. The Epic Glacier National Park meetup is held June 30th through July 2nd. Get a hold of Think Fella and Ojibwa. And the Cheers and Jeers annual Cheers and Jeers dinner for Netroots Nation occurs this year in Atlanta on Wednesday, August 9th at 5:30 p.m. Cosmail Navajo to RSVP a seat. And that is your Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community calendar for the 19th of April of 2017. And April showers bring May flowers, and monsoons in the Northwest, I don't know, they bring flowers too, don't they, Angie?
Yes, they do. But mostly they bring water in the reservoirs, for which we're all grateful around here.
Isn't that nice? Even though Oregon, the part of Oregon I live in is a bit more arid than what people usually ascribe Oregon to. But Oregon tends to be pretty wet, and Washington wetter, and reservoirs were pretty darn tapped until the monsoons came back. I keep telling family, and they concur. These are, this is the spring. I kind of remember springs being when I was a kid back in the late 50s, early 60s. And I don't know if that's good or bad.
Anytime it comes to recharging the aquifers, it's good.
Yes.
And
I'm
all the aquifers here lead to rivers, so if they overfill, it's just going to jump into the Columbia eventually. Still good.
See, that's the point. I'm all for hydroelectric power versus nuclear power, and anytime we can decommission nuclear power plants along the Columbia River Gorge, I say is a good thing. So, okay.
Well, hydroelectric power has left the Pacific Northwest with the lowest power rates in the country for more than 50 or 60 years, I think, at this point.
Say that one more time. The lowest what? Rates.
Lowest power rates in the country for more than 50 or 60 years, and it leaves Bonneville Power Authority, or the Bonneville Power Administration, I'm sorry, one of the few federal agencies that take zero tax dollars to run, because all the power they generate with the dams they manage and the electric grid that they manage pay the cost of everything Bonneville does, including sending $1 billion payment to the U.S. Treasury every year on the payoff on the construction of the dams that built the hydroelectric system back in the middle of the 20th century.
Right.
So, electric power, yay, yay, yay.
I love that part. Now, I know we're going to speak about Heller and the Second Amendment and your gun fail diary, but I just realized that you have some specific and long, in-depth knowledge about this particular subject that I've always been a little curious about. When I was a kid, when the nuclear power plants were being built along the Columbia River Gorge and elsewhere, there were many in my family that were adamantly against it, being that we had all this great hydroelectric power. Let's advance that technology, because all that a nuclear power plant is doing is heating up water to make steam to turn a turbine, which is what rushing water is doing in the first place.
Naturally, right?
Now, how was it that, like, the Bonneville nuclear power plant, for instance, got commissioned? I mean, was this just...
So Bonneville Power...
I could never figure out how that happened.
Yeah. No, Bonneville Power was divorced. I'm just having word salad this morning. Divorced entirely from the Whoops power plant system. That was a multi-state deal going on. What happened was, in the 60s and the early 70s, this commission thought that there was going to be this huge need for power within 35 years, and they thought that the hydroelectric system wouldn't come close to being able to meet the needs of it. So they decided that they would build 5 nuclear power plants here in the Northwest, right? And they got one almost up and running, and it had problems. The second one was barely started when the forecasts that had been made 15 years earlier started to fall apart, right? Then there were some huge corruption issues, and they eventually spiraled out after about a year and a half, I believe, into this massive scandal in which the ratepayers here in the Northwest got stuck with a bill for a couple $2 billion to pay off the cost of the work of building that one plant that never really went into production, and the startup of the second plant, and the bonds that were issued to start paying for the other plants that never got built.
Wow.
Disaster of unmitigated proportions here. And it's why people in this part of the country really loathe nuclear power. It's not so much that nuclear power is the place that creates more toxic waste than it starts with in some cases, right? It's just, it's that it's that generation-old memory of how evil nuclear power is, because it came right out of our pocketbooks. Didn't give us any electricity. That's the backstory. But Bonneville Power, nothing to do with that.
All right. I just remember the nuclear power plant that we call the Bonneville nuclear power plant, and there were, according to my family, some cancer cells of populations that either worked or lived nearby. And there was nothing ever proved. I mean, it was anecdotal in our family. It's like, oh, well, so-and-so, great aunt so-and-so contracted a cancer. And they go, oh, yeah, they lived right next to the power plant. And somebody else got something, and they worked there.
It's quite possible your family conflated the Hanford nuclear plant problem.
You know what? I'm sorry. that's my mistake. You're right. It is Hanford, not Vaudeville. I'm thinking of Hanford.
Yeah, because my mother grew up here in this same area, like 25 miles away from where I'm at now, and in the 1940s and in the 1950s, they let off some clouds of irradiated steam out of the Hanford plant, and they had discharge of nuclear waste treated water into the Columbia River a number of times, and they buried a bunch of waste in the 80s, because I know a guy who used to work for the laborers union who worked on part of that decommissioning. He said at night they had giant tractors out in the middle of the night, backhoes, digging giant holes out in the sand around Hanford and burying equipment and tools and materials, all kinds of stuff that they should have had to quarantine, right? Because it got irradiated or got contaminated. They just buried it in the sand. And they buried leaking 50-gallon barrels of all kinds of toxic material up there for decades that leached into the groundwater. So your memory of where that plant is may be wrong, but all the other stuff, you remembered it pretty good.
Right. Well, one of the things, this sounds, I don't know, macabre or what, almost conducive of the times. But when I was a little kid living in Klamath Falls up in the top of the Cascades in the late 50s, early 60s, one of the things we used to do is take out the patio furniture and watch the nuclear test flashes from the Nevada desert. You could see them on the horizon if you look sort of like southeast a bit.
Whoa.
And that used to be like a form of entertainment, sit out there, adults would have their beer and a barbecue, and we kids would be roasting marshmallows, and then you'd see these flashes in the sky.
It was a different era. My family in the 60s, my dad would put us, all four of us kids, in the station wagon, and we would go sit over beside the airfield at Portland International Airport and watch planes take off and land. That's what was considered entertainment by a working class family in the 1960s in the Pacific Northwest.
We did the same thing, except we had our little local airport in Eugene, Springfield, and that was our form of entertainment. We'd go on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon and watch the prop planes take on and off, and they were little ones, they weren't the big
as kids used to love that stuff.
Yeah, and I still to this day I sort of. When I go by a little local airport, it brings back those fond memories. I just want to stop and watch these little pipers take off. Well,
Can you imagine taking a pass full of kids 8, 9, 10, 11 years old today, putting them in a car and going to the airport and saying, we're going to watch the planes take off and land?
Yeah, they look at you and go, okay, Grandma and Grandpa are having problems again. Well, let's talk about now this was a quite sober diary that you wrote yesterday, and about this Facebook thing, and it has that intersection with the Second Amendment, the Heller decision. So we got about 10 minutes or so. So why don't we get a quick synopsis about what Heller is, how it impacts on the Second Amendment, because, of course, that was the first time that a decision was made that there was an individual right, apparently, to possess arms. But why don't we get a bit of background, and then we'll talk about societal failure in the midst of these public murders.
So Washington, D.C. passed a regulation that said if you had a handgun, it had to be, it wasn't that it had to be registered, it was that it had to be, the ammunition and the firearms had to be stored separately inside the house, and what was the other part? I want to say they wanted them to be registered, but I'm pretty sure that's not it, because Heller was in 2008. But at any rate, this special police officer, he was on some special forces, he wanted to have a handgun at home, and he thought that his rights were being abrogated, so he sued the city of Washington, D.C. And the Supreme Court eventually got the case, and they said, Antonin Scalia, he wrote the majority opinion, and he absolutely said that these two clauses are not dependent upon each other, and the right of individuals to own a firearm for home defense, which is a traditional American use of firearms, is perfectly acceptable under the Second Amendment. And you're right, it was the first time in history that the Supreme Court had ever said that. For over 130 years, when cases had been brought about firearms, the court had always held that the Second Amendment, which says that the security of a free nation, now I can't remember the word.
Free people shall, free people and a well-regulated militia.
Right. Well, so they said that for the first time in history, the Supreme Court said you needn't be a member of a militia for your right to own a firearm to be supported, right? And we had about 40 years of propaganda by the NRA at that point, telling people all kinds of crazy things. I mean, people today, younger people at least, I'm going to be 56 this summer. When I was 12 years old in 1972, I took a gun safety course with a room full of boys at the Moose Lodge, and the NRA sponsored that because back in the 70s, the NRA was about education and firearm safety and making sure that laws in the various states
gun storage.
Did not prevent hunters from having the right to hunt for food, right? And somewhere during the fundamental religious Christian right rise in politics in this country, the NRA got scooped up in that whole thing, and they started pushing this crazy idea that a good guy with a gun can kill a bad guy with a gun. And in Heller, the Supreme Court justices bought into that urban legend. That's why they found for that, because it's in the words of their finding, that it's a traditional American right to protect your home with a gun, which is just never, ever really been true. And it's not true today. In the story that I wrote, I cite studies that prove that it's just an urban legend. There were like 1.3 million cases of guns involved in crimes in 2013, I think it was. And there were like 529 cases, reported, documented cases where somebody had a firearm and protected themselves out of 1.3 million crimes committed with firearms. So the number of people who used a gun for a good reason versus somebody who's using guns for a bad reason, the math is so bad that it's statistically zero. So that's the whole point.
For me also, and this gets short shrift, but as being a dyed-in-the-wool grammar Nazi, the Scalia totally disregarded what we would now call an Oxford comma in the amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right. That second clause in English language is dependent upon the first clause.
And
he just decided that legally it wasn't true.
The people is not a person. The people in this, and if we want to go by originalism, the people in this context is the community.
Exactly. Which is
not a person.
Which is an argument I've tried to present to people for a number of years now. The Constitution was written 4 years later. The 10 amendments, the first 10 amendments to the Bill of Rights were written. So in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 and 16 mention things that the Congress has power over. One of them is making some of the regulations for the militias, arming the militias, training the militias. And 4 years later, when they wrote the Second Amendment, they included the fact that people should have the right to keep and bear arms individually. That 4 intervening years, there were lots of discussions. The Federalist Papers were written. There was a huge discussion about these armories that sheriffs would have to keep to provide the armaments for the militias to be called up and distributed to them when they're called up, right? The sheriffs didn't want the work. The states and the county governments didn't want the cost of buying the weapons. I'm a firm believer that the reason the Second Amendment was written the way it was and the timing of when it was written is a direct result of all of those conversations so that individual people would have to bear the cost of buying their own weapons so that when they got called up for service, they would come with a rifle and not a hoe or a shovel.
Right.
It had nothing to do with personal self-defense. It was all about defense of community.
And that's why it starts off with a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state.
Of a free state.
The right of a free state, the right of the people to own their own guns, because we can't afford to have you not trained enough to be able to fight in this well-regulated militia. So bring your guns along. That's what that means.
Yes, remember it. At that point in our history, we had no standing army. We did not have regulated police forces. All we had were county sheriffs and the militia. That was it. That was the defense of every person that was a member of the United States' inception, were these militias who were the men of the community who were 18 to 60 years old, I believe, was the age that they were called up for militia duty. So, yeah, the whole issue of guns and the Second Amendment, our modern urban myths have gotten into our law now. That's my point. It's just crazy time.
Well, this may be a leap in associative value, but let's try this, because I've looked at this issue a bit and how these things transpire. And whenever commerce is involved with ideology, it seems the right wing is the master of that. I maintain that, back in the day when we were kids and we were afraid of the Russians bombing us, we had to dive under desks. Remember the scandals on the local level of municipalities regulating that you had to have like a bomb shelter? And then it would turn out that people in the city council or the county commission had some sort of
concrete company.
Exactly, concrete companies, and so everybody's getting paid off to build bomb shelters, right? And so they used an ideology to advance commerce. When the NRA change came on the heels of the Southern Strategy, in which we were living in American carnage, and here was an opportunity to meld ideology and commerce. People are afraid of brown people killing them in their sleep at night, but if you have a gun, you can keep that from happening.
Yeah.
So I see
guns.
Wayne LaPierre sitting around going, wow, it worked with bomb shelters. Maybe it'll work with guns. So, I don't know. Like I said, it's a leap in associative value. So,
but sadly, fear is a great driver of the American people. It always has been. It reminds me of the first 8 minutes of the first episode of The Newsroom that Aaron Sorkin wrote, all the language of, where the Will McAvoy character, he goes on this long spiel of all the things that America's first in, and none of them are good things, right? Or we're not first in anything. We're all 25th and 34th and 42nd. And then he talks about how people in this country are too afraid, and he says, but we didn't used to be, right? We didn't used to be a country who thought that being smart was bad, who thought that using our laws for good, we waged war on poverty, not on poor people, is one of the things he says. Mm-hmm. It's compelling television for me because it really speaks to the things that I hold deeply dear, my own personal philosophy of life. And the reason that I can't stand the Republicans is because they always say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But the same way that they say, carry that baby to term, and then the minute you have it, we don't want to hear about it anymore. Their ideology is skewed and twisted and not supportive of good family values. I don't care what they say. They are not the party of family values. They're the party of, scumbag values in lots of ways.
We used to joke that the only people who say pull yourself up by your bootstraps are the ones that are going to beat you down when you do.
Yeah. And my baby, the only people who like that are the people who sell bootstraps.
There you go. Well, like I said, melding commerce with ideology, it's it's a tactic that seems to be very lucrative, and a certain political spectrum has perfected it seems. Well, Angie, we've come to the end of our broadcast period. There's so much to talk about. I do have the link to Angie's diary, and it is quite comprehensive, and I do suggest go to it. And I also put a link to the Wikipedia page for the Heller decision and some background on that too as well. So thanks, Angie. We'll talk to you next week.
My story actually has a link to the Heller decision right at the Cornell Law Library Legal Institute, the actual text.
There it is. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, well.
Talk to you guys later.
All right. Talk to you next week. Okay, folks, we better bug out of here. Of course, we have Hartman coming up at 6 minutes after the hour. In the interim, we'll listen to Norway's Mari Boyne playing I Come From the Other Side. But I do want to remind you that Wink does have Jibber Your Jabber tonight. Begins at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast. A 2-hour opportunity for live call-in radio. You know you want to.
Yeah.
There's so much news we can't keep up. All right, so I mentioned that just by way of suggesting that you should continue listening to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365. And why? Well, because who loves you, baby? Oh, and Wink, as Columbo would say, one more thing. I'll see you on the other side.
All right. We're out.